This conference is being recorded. Thank you. And for those of you who just arrived, if you would just introduce yourself using the chat feature. Just tell us again your name, organization, where you're at, and one issue that you're working on. And again, the participants will be muted, so we ask that you use the chat feature to ask questions, and you can ask questions all along the way. So we wanted to start out just by doing a little bit of an introduction on what is the Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing. We know some of you know us well, but some of you may be really new to working with us, and a lot has been growing and changing for us over the last year. So just wanted to start with a little introduction. So basically, FCYO is a collaborative of funders and youth organizers that are committed to getting resources to youth organizing groups and to building a strong and stable youth organizing field. But first, so what do we mean by youth organizing? Because people use that term differently sometimes. So our focus has always been on, first, on groups that are led by low-income young people and young people of color. Second, by organizing, we mean taking collective action, building leaders, and organizing campaigns for deep systemic change. And we know that supporting healing and leadership development can be part of that. But for us, it also has to include base building and taking action for systemic change to be organizing. So I want to be clear about what we mean by organizing. And also, it's important to understand that at FCYO, our main focus has always been on young people ages 13 to 18, because we feel like no one else is specifically focused on those younger young people. But we are increasingly interested in building relationships with organizations working with older young people as well, because as we build a strong social justice leadership pipeline, we need those relationships for young people as they age out of high school. So I also want to say that this is a really exciting time for youth organizing. A few years ago, we were talking a lot about the loss of funders and the decrease in support for youth organizing. But over the last year or so, we see that is beginning to change. And we really think that's because of the work that you all are doing, right? The work of the Movement for Black Lives, the work of folks organizing immigrant youth leaders. And the work around school to prison pipeline, to name just a few of the issues. The fabulous work that low-income young people and young people of color have been doing in demonstrating that they are on the front lines of social justice has started to get the attention of funders. That's because of your work. So our hope at FCYO is to help ensure that this interest in youth organizing that's coming back results in long-term sustained support for your work, that it's not just a blip on the radar. So our work at FCYO now fits into three main categories. And we just want to make sure you understand what we're doing. So the first, as you see here on this slide, is what we call Youth Core. And Youth Core is a set of programs that are designed to create regular learning opportunities that bring folks together across the youth organizing field, right? Our second set of programs are what we call grant making and capacity building programs. So those are designed directly to get money to the field and to help build the capacity of youth organizing groups. And then the third set of programs are funder advocacy and communications. And those are programs designed to try to get more funders who are committed to youth organizing and to help spread knowledge and information about the power of this work. So that's a quick summary, and then I'm going to turn it over to the rest of our staff, to Will and Monica, to go a little bit deeper into each of those three areas. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Will, who's going to talk about the funder advocacy and communications work.
I think we have Youth Core up first there.
Oh, sorry guys, I can't see the slides for some reason.
Whoops, so sorry about that. All right, that's Monica talking about Youth Core. Go ahead, Monica.
the joys of technology. So thanks, Eric. As he mentioned, we have one of the main components of our work is called Youth Core. And we really see Youth Core as an opportunity to build a more interconnected youth organizing field. So this is a space in which we try to both support youth organizations coming together to share learning and to also continue to build on their knowledge or share their own knowledge. And it's a program that we launched last year and is continuing until this year. Youth Core has a few main components, one of them being our national convening. So I know many of you may have come to our national convening last year in North Carolina, and we had over 100 organizations, over 200 young people and youth organizers together in one space. It was really amazing. And we decided that we would start to do those every 2 years. So our next national convening will be next fall in 2017. So please keep an eye out for announcements from us about the next youth organizing national convening. We also do monthly webinars. So these could be, and we like to tap your all's knowledge about what's useful, but we also like to share knowledge through the webinars that you all have, whether it's a particular strategy or a type of organizing that you do, or it's something that we're hearing from the field that is a learning opportunity. And we do those through monthly webinars similar to this one, and you can register for them and get to learn a little something new, hopefully. And then lastly, which we'll get into a little bit deeper, this year we're going to be launching our Learning and Exchange Fund. And this will be an opportunity for folks to apply for some money to do some additional learning, whether it's visiting another organization or anything, other opportunities that we'll talk a little bit more about later. And that's kind of Youth Core in a nutshell. Eric, did you want to add anything?
No, that's great. Do you want to move on and talk about the grant making and capacity building?
Sure. So another core component of our work is grant making and capacity building. So again, we think that to have a strong youth organizing field, we have to have strong organizations, and any opportunity that we can have to provide resources directly to the field is something that we're really excited about. And this year we have a lot of opportunities to do that, fortunately, that we're super, super excited about. So Eric will talk a little bit more later about the Moment to Movement Fund, which is currently opened, and I'm sure is the reason that many of you are on this webinar to hear more about. I'll talk a little bit more about healthy communities in a second, but the other opportunity we have, again, is our capacity building. So this year, we've done it every year. This year, previous years it's been around financial management or media and technology. This year it's going to be about implementing funding for holistic youth organizing. And then we'll also have a new grant making opportunity coming up either next summer or next fall. We're not sure what this is going to look like because we're still in the process of developing it.
Great. And Will, do you want to talk now about the funder advocacy and communications work?
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Monica. The last major area where FCYO is focusing our work, starting this year, but also it's always been a part of our work, is through funder advocacy and communications. So starting this fall, FCYO is really substantially investing in our funder advocacy and communications work, with the goal of increasing resources going directly to youth organizing from philanthropy. And our main goal here is to really increase knowledge and awareness of youth organizing and develop a core of aligned funders committed to expanding resources for this work. The activities that we're starting this fall, there are a few of them, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on them later, especially the mapping function, which some of the folks who are joining because of the Moment to Movement Fund probably have already seen a little bit of the map. So there are a few activities that we're undertaking as part of funder advocacy and communications. The first is our youth organizing landscape map. And this map we've built over the last year will create a platform for youth organizers to showcase your work to funders and allow funders to learn more about youth organizing work in the areas they are interested in. And it will also allow FCYO to learn more about the field and better advocate and communicate for your work to funders. This youth organizing map, which we'll go into a little bit more detail later, is really the engine that is going to drive a lot of our funder advocacy and communications work and help us learn more about the work that you do. The second piece is around our ongoing communications platform. FCYO is investing in being a better platform to uplift stories and the work coming out of the field to funders and the general public. And functionally, what will come out of that work is our ongoing regular email newsletters, communicating some work coming out of the field, opportunities in the field, and opportunities in philanthropy. Also sharing a lot of this content across our social media platforms through our Twitter and Facebook pages, and through creating, sponsoring, and placing some editorial content on trends and issues that are coming out of the field of youth organizing. We're also doing some work around publications. FCYO has long been the go-to resource on the efficacy and power of youth organizing, and has sponsored and published publications that really speak to that work. FCYO's occasional paper series is the most widely cited research on youth organizing. So going forward, we will continue to sponsor and produce publications on a variety of important topics relating to youth organizing, including a series of targeted briefs and digital projects starting this year. The last area of communications and funder advocacy are in-person funder briefings. FCYO will continue to be active in funder spaces around the country, advocating for youth organizing and telling the stories of work being done on the ground, and bringing in funders and youth organizers together. We'll also sponsor a series of our own briefings around the country that will bring together funders and youth organizers to learn more about the work and help educate funders and support them to fund youth organizing. And we'll start some of this starting this fall and spring, so stay tuned for more about that work. So that kind of closes out the big picture view of the funder advocacy and communication section.
Right, great. Thank you, Will. And we had a great question from Fahad at Drum about what we can learn from why funders withdrew from youth organizing, and how we can ensure that the renewed interest is maintained for the long term. We could have a whole webinar. It's a great question. We can and should have a whole webinar on that topic. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. Some of it is that in philanthropy loves the shiny penny, and things go in cycles. So one of the things that we are looking at in this time, beyond some of the stuff that Will talked about how do we identify folks within philanthropy who aren't currently funding youth organizing that could, and how do we get their engagement? Another thing that we're looking at in this time is, while we have resources, what are strategies beyond foundation funding that we can invest in to ensure long-term sustainability? How do we build support from individual donors? And other kinds of strategies beyond foundation funding, and what can we invest in now while there are resources to help create that long-term sustainability? So that's one of the things that we're also trying to look at FCYO, and we can maybe get into some of those other sort of longer term questions as we go on down the road. So one of the things that Monica mentioned that we wanted to get a little bit of feedback on now is around the webinars. As part of Youth Corps, we do these regular webinars, which we hope are a space for learning, for sharing great resources, for tools on organizational sustainability, supporting youth leaders, and building power. We'd like to get your feedback right now, and you can just do this in the chat, on what are topics for webinars you would like to see over the next year. So it can be things that are related to funding strategies. It can be great tools that your organization has developed that you would like to share with the field. It can be strategies around building power, speakers that are out there that you think are really amazing that maybe we can't get for an individual group, but collectively we can. So put in the chat any topics that you would like to see us do webinars on over the next year. While you're putting these things in, and I see some great suggestions right now, I'll just tell you some of the things that we are considering for this next year for webinars. One we're looking at to do soon is around grassroots organizing. I'm sorry, around grassroots fundraising, how groups can raise more money from individuals. We're also looking at something around justice reinvestment, this idea of divesting in institutions that are hurting our communities and using those resources to pay for the things that we want. So that's a strategy that we're looking at. We're thinking about doing something around alumni support. How do we help support alumni of youth organizing groups after they graduate? So those are the few of the things that we've been considering, but we'd love to get your suggestions. So you can just keep them coming in the chat with any other ideas that you would like to have, webinars that you'd like to see. So yeah, keep those ideas coming. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Monica, we're going to start to go in now deeper into some of the program areas. And answer your questions. We're going to go deeper now into some of the programs that are available this year that you might have questions about. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Monica to talk about the healthy communities.
Great, thanks, Eric. And we love all the ideas that are popping up in the chat. I'm like looking over and they look really great. So if you didn't really digest everything that we just went through in the last 10 minutes, not to worry, we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive at some of this so that maybe you can remember some of this stuff as you leave today. So know that you can always reach out to us, if your questions aren't answered in the chat, or if you have any follow-up questions on any of the specific topic areas. So Healthy Communities is one of our granting initiatives. This year we're in phase 3 of it. So we've been doing this for almost about 6 years. And it's really an initiative that is about supporting the work of low-income young people of color that they're doing around health and wellness in their communities. And we've had a lot of really great success. The foundation of it this past year has been both communications work and a fellowship program. And so we are moving into choosing organizations for phase 3, which will be launching this fall. And we're going to, again, have 8 fellows based at community-based organizations across the country that will be leading work on the ground connected to school health and wellness. And this year, we're excited that we have the opportunity to broaden our understanding of what health and wellness looks like beyond physical health to also social and emotional health within the school setting. So it's been a really great opportunity for youth organizations to build, to share strategies. And we're really excited to be launching it again this year. The invite to apply, so this process launched earlier this summer, and the invites to apply for this particular initiative have already gone out. So unfortunately, it won't be open again for another couple of years because it's a 2-year initiative. But we think it's important for folks to know the breadth and depth of the work of FCYO. And if folks are interested in connecting to any of the organizations that are leading these innovative campaigns, feel free to outreach to us, and also to check out our social media sites. So it has, we have our own social media for Healthy Communities. That is the Youth for Healthy Schools Facebook. And we're often posting really interesting articles or campaign wins or opportunities for action there. So we'd really love it if you'd all take a moment to follow us.
Okay, thank you, Monica. All right, folks, I'm switching to a different computer because that one I was having a little tech trouble. So hopefully I'll be coming through a little clearer now. So the next piece is that we want to talk about is around the Moment to Movement Fund, which I assume is why many of you joined this webinar. So if you have questions about the Moment to Movement Fund, I'm going to do a quick overview of it, and then you can start to put your questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can today. So the background on this Moment to Movement Fund is that initially we had a plan to design a long-term multi-year grant-making initiative, and we're still planning to do that next year. But when we looked at what was happening in the field, we were going to wait and launch that later this year. And we looked at what was happening in the field. We looked at the amazing campaigns that people were leading right now, and we said we need to start getting money out to support the important work of these movements right now. And so that's why we're offering these 1-year grants while we're designing this long-term multi-year grant-making strategy to start next year. FCYO over the last couple of years hasn't been able to do as much re-granting. So we're excited to be able to come back into a space of being able to do more regranting. So about this moment to movement fund, I mean, I think in terms of the framing of it, we see this as a really powerful moment for young people right now. That young people are playing leading roles across a variety of movements, including the movement for Black lives, immigrant rights, ending the school to prison pipeline. And so we want to support groups that are responding to this moment in ways that build long-term power, and in ways that are engaging all of the young people that have been politicized by these moments and engaging them for the long term. So the Moment to Movement Fund will make one-year grants to groups responding to the current moment in ways that build long-term power. So our priorities are Black-led organizing, police accountability, immigrant rights, LGBTQ rights, and nonpartisan voter engagement. But we're also open to other proposals about how you are responding to the current moment in your local community in ways that build long-term power. So let us, those are our priorities, but you can let us know how you see the political moment in your area and how you're responding to that. The grant size will range from $10,000 to $25,000. A little bit about our priorities and what we want to support. It'll be really important, and I keep saying this over and over again, but demonstrate how you're responding to the current moment, how you see that current moment, and how it's building lasting power. Second, we really want to see you demonstrate that you have a plan to either win concrete policy victories or to engage significant numbers of marginalized and oppressed young people for the long term, and preferably do both of those, right? Both winning concrete victories and really engaging politicized young people for the long haul. A note about voter engagement. We are excited about supporting voter engagement as a strategy for building power, but we're excited about voter engagement, again, as a strategy for building power. We're not interested in voter engagement as an end to itself. So if you have a way that you're encouraging more folks in your community to get out and vote, and participate, especially even in these next upcoming elections. We're going to try to get these grants out at least a month before these next elections. So we're interested in ways that you might be encouraging more folks to do nonpartisan voter engagement, but it has to be connected to a strategy to build power for your community. And then lastly on these priorities, and this is really important, again, FCYO always has a preference for proposals that engage 13 to 18-year-olds, because we don't think there's many other people that are really focused on that early entrance into the leadership pipeline. However, again, we do see the importance of engaging 18 to 25-year-olds and are really interested in proposals that build relationships between younger young people and older young people as well, and especially if it's really focused on building that kind of a comprehensive leadership pipeline. So those are some of the preferences that we have. So what will we not fund? We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, as are many of you. That means we will not fund lobbying, support for legislation, or support of candidates of any kind. If you have more questions about that, you can reach out to us, or there's great resources out there on how you can really activate people in the political process as a C3 organization. Alliance for Justice, a lot of other places have good resources, and we can help connect you with those. But we cannot legally fund those activities. As I said before, voter engagement only as it's about a long-term strategy for building power. And again, I'll emphasize that we're supporting organizing. That means, that healing, leadership development, support work for young people can be part of your proposal, but we really want to emphasize that it should include a strategy to build power and to engage young people in collective action that addresses systemic change. We're committed to funding organizing. So those are some of the things that we will not support. The timeline here, we released the RFP in August. The proposals are due September 9th, and the grant decisions we hope to have by September 23 to 26. We're going to try to do this as quickly as we can. Just a little bit about the process. As you should have seen in the RFP, which is on our website, there's 4 parts to what we're asking. The first is the online profile, and Will is going to go over that in detail because I know many people may have questions about that in just a minute. There's a cover page, there's a narrative, and then we need some attachments. So we're asking everybody to send those to complete the online profile, and then email us those 3 things to the email address that's listed here, grants@fcyo.org, by September 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So that is the process. And with that, I will let's start addressing some of the questions. So I see there's a bunch of questions in here. And we will now try to address as many of them as possible. Somebody said, how many grants will be given out? We have about $380,000 total in this pool. So it will depend on the grant size. If they were if they were all $25,000 grants, that would be about 15. So it's a this is, and I'll emphasize, there's less money in this pool than there is need. We recognize, and that's a great challenge. And we are working on other strategies to try to identify other funders. We will not be able to fund every proposal. Unfortunately, we wish there's more good work out there than we will be able to support. So we have about $380,000 in this fund for these 1-year grants. And our hope is to continue to build more as we continue coming, as we continue to build more resources. I see. Do we only fund organizations who are fiscally sponsored? As of now, legally, we can only, the grants to these organizations can only go to organizations who have a C3 or have a fiscal sponsor. If there are folks who do not have a C3 or a fiscal sponsor, they can contact us, and we can see if there are ways that we may be able to provide support. But given the the legal challenges of us as a C3 and where we get our money from, the grants can only go to organizations that either have a C3 or have a fiscal agent. If you don't have either of those things, please let us know, and we'll do the, we will see if there are ways that we can support, but we'll have to work within the legal constructs that exist. Let's see. Let me just try to go to as many of these questions as we can. Let's see. There's a question here from Angela. There seems to be a disconnect between the movement funding and the current movements, which are not being led by traditional nonprofit organizations, and in fact resist such structures as being part of the problem. This is a really important issue, and we recognize. There was a webinar that we did this last year on building on movement building and on momentum-based organizing. We know that there are challenges with foundation funding, that sometimes it has hurt movements more than it has helped it. We also think that these are some of the resources that are available for our movement at this time, and you all as an organization have to decide strategically how you can use these resources and these tools to move forward your movement goals. This is absolutely a challenge, and it's a challenge for us as a movement to figure out how we do build funding that is outside of foundations. That's something we're interested in at FCYO. We're interested in supporting your groups to do that. We recognize that that's a challenge, and we recognize that these are some of the resources that are available for this work right now, and we have to use them strategically. So that's kind of our viewpoint on that, but we understand the issues that you're raising. Will and Monica, feel free to address some of these questions. They're coming in faster than I can. Feel free to either flag ones that you see that are important, or to chime in on answering them too, because they're coming in faster than I can read and answer them. So feel free to join in.
And I think that there was a bunch even while you were talking that came up, and I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if we don't get to your question, you should feel free to email one of us, and we can work to address the questions that don't get answered. Because there's a lot.
Yeah, someone asked about, someone asked, this webinar is being recorded and will be available later. Yes.
There's a few questions, Eric. I don't know if you want to address it, but there's a few questions around significant numbers
Yes.
and how do you define significant numbers?
Good question. We don't have a definition of what that means. I think what we're saying when we're talking about significant numbers, what we're saying is that over this last year or two has really been, a politicizing moment, I think, especially for young people of color across this country. We see that there are tens of thousands of young people of color in particular who are ready to organize and want to organize. And in fact, there are less opportunities and structures to support them. We need more opportunities and structures to support those young people. There's young people who want to get active, and we don't have enough organizations that are out there to help them do that. So we don't have a definition of what those numbers mean, but what we're saying is, how are you responding to all of these young people around who are responding to this moment and want to be engaged? And what is your plan to try to engage as many of them as possible? And we don't define what those numbers mean or what's a lot because we're not in your community. We don't know that context. But what we are saying is there's an opportunity to engage a lot of young people right now. And we don't want that to be missed. And how are you thinking about doing that?
Mm-hmm. And there's another question about long-term engagement. Can we speak to the impact you're hoping to see in 1 year timeframe, especially in regard to long-term engagement policy wins? They're often incremental in a longer process. So since it's a 1 year grant,
yeah,
I'm assuming folks are interested in what we actually expect folks to achieve in that 1 year.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we really understand that this is long-term work, right? And that's why we keep talking about building long-term power, right? So what we want to see, we don't necessarily expect, we don't necessarily expect there to be policy wins in every case in 1 year. What we want to know is, what's your plan? When we say engage for the long term, what we mean is that there's lots of these young people who've really been radicalized by these different movement moments. And what are you going to do to help make sure that they stay involved beyond a particular moment? How do we help these young people really become part of the social justice movement for the long haul? And how are you thinking about doing that? So when we say long-term engagement, that's what we mean. How do we take people who, got active, came to a big rally, something really politicized them? How do we make sure that they stay engaged in this work over the long term? And we understand. You let us know, what that looks like in your community, what the expectation is. We know that policy victories can take a long time. We're really interested in the process of organizing and of engaging significant numbers of young people in this process, more than we want you to sort of prove that you can win a policy victory in a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, there've been a couple of questions about national networks applying for more than one site, or a sort of national organization with different chapters.
Yeah, FCYO has typically done more support for local organizations, but we realize that a lot of folks are operating through national networks, and that national networks are playing a really important role. These aren't massive grants, we realize, for national networks, and we may, national networks that are already well funded, we may prioritize, folks that have less access to resource, but there are national networks that are not well funded. I think, and so we are open to supporting national, and we're really open to collaborations between groups as well. Go ahead, Monica.
I think the question was, I think the question was about can multiple organizations that are a part of one network apply? And I think the answer to that is yes. And I think there was another question about, can organizations submit multiple proposals? Which I would say the answer is probably also yes, but you're not going to get funded more than once. So might want to think strategically about where to prioritize your proposals. And then, Eric, there's another question about what is entailed in the review process, who is involved, are youth on any of the review committees? So going forward, what?
Yeah, the review process, we're going to do this. This is going to be a quick review process, So it's going to be FCYO staff that will do the initial review, which is Monica, Will, and myself, and then our board, which includes youth organizers, will do the final approval of the dockets. Our board is a mixture of youth organizers and funders, and our board will do the final approval with us doing the initial review. There was a question about, can groups apply for more than one grant? So an organization can only apply to the Moment to Movement Fund once. Somebody asked about healthy communities. I mean, I think, as Monica mentioned, the healthy communities one is invite only. So and those invites have gone out. Those groups are eligible to apply to the Moment to Movement Fund as well. Let's see. Yeah, we don't have, people asked about different expenses. These are basically going to be, general operating support grants, or in some cases for a specific project, if that's what works best in your case. We don't have requirements about whether it goes to salaries or stipends or conferences or whatever. Yeah, I mean, somebody asked about how to incorporate healing into their work without negating the organizing component. I would just suggest, we did a webinar on that last year. It's archived on our website with a number of youth organizing groups that talked about how they incorporate healing and personal transformation into organizing work. That is going to be part of the focus of the capacity building initiative that we're going to talk about in a few moments. And there's a great webinar that's archived on our site about that. Yeah, one organization should only apply one time to the Moment to Movement Fund. Let's see. Will and Monica, are there other things that are important for us to address here?
There's questions about reporting, like what is the reporting going to look like? And then a question around, will you review proposals as they're being crafted, or will you provide feedback on proposals as they're being crafted? Discuss or give feedback on proposals.
Right. Let's see. In terms of reporting, we will ask for a report at the end of the year. So they're one-year grants. At the end of the year, we'll ask for a narrative. It'll be pretty straightforward, narrative on what was accomplished, because we really want to know what was accomplished and what was learned. So there'll be a basic narrative report and a simple financial report. It won't be, it'll be one report. It won't be real extensive. And let's see. And in terms, what was the other question? Was about the review. If people have questions, we're on a short timeline. So we may not be able to have, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have the time to do a full review of a proposal and provide feedback on it, because of we're trying to make this as simple, as simple a process as possible. So if people have questions ahead of time that you want to ask, especially by email, we'll try to answer as many. We'll try to be responsive to those, but we may not be able to read a full proposal and provide feedback on it to all applicants. There's a question here about an organization that has campaigns both in police brutality and voter engagement. When applying, should we focus on both campaigns or separate them out? It's fine to tell us about both. I mean, it's up to you. If you want to apply specifically for one, that's fine, or it's okay to say these are the two things that we're working on that both seem relevant, and it's fine to include both of them. It's really up to you.
Eric, there was a question about if receiving funding through Moment to Movement, can we apply to other programs? Like Youth Corps, there was a question around healthy communities as well.
Yes, the Moment to Movement Fund the Moment to Movement Fund will not disqualify you from any other FCYO program. the groups that are in healthy communities will not be eligible to apply for the capacity building initiative this year. That is the only that's the only one that we will not that we won't double up on, because we do want to make sure we don't just support the same groups over and over again and get we really do have an effort to try to get as much of a diversity of the field as possible. So the only one that we won't double up on is healthy communities and the capacity building program that we'll talk about in a few more minutes. Somebody asked about support for disabled young people. That we'd certainly not something that we've supported a lot in the past, but something we'd certainly be interested in. Definitely interested in cross-cultural Black and Brown organizing, other forms of cross-cultural organizing. All those things that we're really interested in.
Eric, there's a couple of questions about if they're applying for general support, do they need a project-specific budget?
No, you can apply for general operating support, and then you won't need to provide a project specific, especially for smaller organizations. I mean, if you're a really large multi-generational organization, I think we would request that you be more specific about the project. But if you're a smaller youth organizing group, and this is really for general operating support for your core work, it's okay to just provide an organizational budget. But for those larger organizations that have multiple projects, especially ones that aren't about youth organizing, we would ask for a project specific budget. Somebody asked about the guidelines say the preference will be given to Black-led organizations and to some issues. We really do believe in the importance of supporting Black-led organizing in this moment. It does not have to be specifically around the other priority issues that we mentioned. Again, what we would ask if you're a Black-led organizing group that's working on other issues is, again, the question is, how are you responding to this political moment in ways that build long-term power, and how do you define that? We're open to you telling us why that issue is especially significant in this moment. But we are really committed to supporting Black-led organizing in this moment. Yeah. When I said large, a question about how do we define large organizations, I think what I meant is that so if you're a standalone youth organizing group and the work that you're applying to do is really most of the work that you're doing over the next year, I think you're welcome to apply just for general operating support. If you're a multi-generational organizing group, or a group that has different projects, some of which are not youth organizing, much of which is not connected to the specific work that you're applying for, then you should apply for a specific project for your youth organizing work. Right. We do not have a maximum or minimum budget requirement for this, but if there are very, very large, well-funded organizations that are well over $1 million annual budget, we may prioritize smaller organizations, but we are open to open to proposals from a variety of different kinds of organizations. Okay, I know there's a lot of questions on this, and we're answering as many of them as we can. If we did not get to your question, or if you have something more specific, please feel free to send us a follow-up by email. But again, really what it comes down to is let us know how how you see this political moment in your community, how you're responding to that in a way that builds long-term power. That's the bottom line of what's most important to us. We know that there's more good work out there than we can support, but we're going to try to support as much of it as we can, and we're going to through our other projects look for ways to support to support other groups. And I think folks should understand that FCYO funding is one of the things that we do, but we are deeply committed to supporting groups that we are sometimes unable to fund through convenings, through our funder advocacy work, and through other things. So we will, we're going to try to, when regranting is the best way that we can get money to groups on the ground, which sometimes it is, we will do that. And then sometimes there's other ways that we can support. We know that many of you are doing great work that we can't support all of it, but we'll try to support as much of it as we can. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Will, who's going to talk about this mapping, this online mapping tool, which is going to be the first step in any of our applications. So we know people have questions about that, and Will is the one who's been working on this, so I will turn it over to him to describe it.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Great. So yeah, as Eric mentioned, FCYO has kind of launched in a soft way, to use the kind of digital parlance, our FCYO youth organizing landscape map. And the most substantive way that we are asking groups to enroll through this is through our programs in this coming year, the first being the Moment to Movement Fund. A little overview on how this project came about. Periodically, FCYO has surveyed the field of youth organizing to gather information on broader trends in the field, challenges and opportunities facing youth organizing groups, for us to gather information on existing youth organizing groups and to learn more about new groups as they come up. And FCYO's field scans, both of which are available on our website right now, were a long and intensive research and focus grouping process that yielded reports that were useful to sort of capturing a snapshot of the field in the current moment, but that took a lot of work and ended in a lot of data that, when it came out, wasn't probably the most recent data that groups could offer. So last year, FCYO went into a process with the Citizen Engagement Labs to build an interactive database and a living landscape map of the field of youth organizing that would really kind of take the place of these scans. So we created this platform to gather information that'll allow FCYO to learn more about the youth organizing field in the same way that our field scans did, but we'll also create a kind of ongoing and interactive platform for funders, youth organizers, and the general public to learn more about what the national youth organizing field looks like and what groups are working on across the country for themselves, and really offering data in a more sort of currently updated way. So really sort of ongoing and refreshed data. And broadly, the information that we gather from organizations like yours, if you're signing up for this map, and the others across the country that make up our youth organizing field, this will really help FCYO raise the profile of youth organizing groups like yours, help us advocate for additional funding for this work, help to continue to build the overall knowledge base about the field, and really help us ensure that we're engaging a wide array of groups in our own programs. So the groups that we know of, but also the groups that we don't know of, allowing us to learn more about what the field really looks like beyond our sort of current knowledge. So really, by learning more about you and your work, we'll be able to uplift your stories, reach out to you with new opportunities that we learn about in philanthropy, and be a better advocate for your work within many different philanthropic spaces. So what is the Youth Organizing Map? Like I said, it's an interactive map that shows youth organizing groups across the country. It also doubles as a searchable database of youth organizing. So the groups going to the map, or anyone in the general public or funders, can search for youth organizing groups based on a list of criteria around issues, around constituencies of young people that the groups engage, and around support services that groups provide. And again, like I said, this map will really be a source of information. The groups that sign up will give FCYO data that will help us to communicate about what the work is happening on the field, help us inform our funder advocacy and our research activities, so we can really have the best information at hand about your work, so we can translate it to funders and help advocate for better funding. And again, most functionally, starting with the Moment to Movement Fund, filling out and updating a profile on this mapping site will be the first step in applying to FCYO's programs. So each year we'll ask groups to fill out a profile or update their profile to include the most current information. And again, just to reiterate, who is this for? This map is really generally or primarily meant as a funder advocacy tool. It's meant for funders to use to learn more about your work, and it's meant for FCYO to gather data to better advocate for your work within philanthropic spaces. It's also a great way for youth organizers to learn more about what's the work that's happening across the country, to learn more about groups that are doing similar work across the country, and maybe engage in relationships with those groups and learn a little bit more about what they do. And it's also for the general public, for folks that are interested in youth organizing for social change across the country. This is a picture of what that field looks like. So that's a little bit about what the map is. I know a lot of groups on this call are starting to fill it out. So I wanted to create a little space to tell you like what's involved in the map, and then open it up for your questions for folks that have already started to fill out your profile or have some questions on what it's going to take to fill out a profile and complete the map. So if you'll notice on the application for the Moment to Movement Fund, by example, there's a link to register for the Youth Organizing Landscape Map. That map will take you to a page where you can fill out an initial registration profile with your organizational name, email, and create a password. That will create your profile and allow you to start filling in information on your profile. It will not make your youth organizing map profile live on the map as of yet. That's something that will have to be approved by FCYO. But you can start to work in your profile, and by the time you finish it, you can let us know to make it live, and we'll show that on the map. So the first step is registering for an account, and by doing that, you'll get a link saying that your map profile is active, and you can start to fill in your information. The next slide, this shows a kind of front page of a existing youth organizing map profile. If you actually go to the map as well, you can see that there's a number of profiles you can peruse and see what this looks like from some number of groups that we had on our feedback committee who had already filled it out. But basically, a youth organizing landscape map profile is going to show a few pieces of general information about who you are and what's the work that you do, and who are the young people that you engage. And then also engage in showing a little bit about like the successes from the work that you've done. So most functionally, this will have some general information on your organization, your organization's model, your mission, your history. It'll have some information on your programs, on your victories, and a person to contact to follow up with you for more information. These are really sort of general pieces of information that most youth organizing groups around the country communicate on their websites. We just want to offer a centralized place for you to showcase it and update it. So there's a number of pieces in this map, and we don't have time to go through each of the profile pieces, but what I wanted to do was spend some time looking at what it takes to fill out the program section of the Youth Organizing Landscape Map profile. And this is really the most important place where youth organizing groups can really describe what you do. When you're filling out your programs, we really opened up this module to allow groups to translate or explain how you do your work in a way that makes sense to you. We're not asking you to fill out in a specific way. We're asking you to fill out how your programs make sense to you. How do you group your different programs? So functionally, this allows you to put in a name for different programs that you do your youth organizing work. Put in a small text description on what this program does. It allows you to tag these programs with different issue areas related to different social justice campaign issue areas. It allows you to tag it with different population groups. This allows you to communicate who are the sort of demographic information of the young people that you engage in this program. It also allows you to tag these programs with support services. So if you're doing youth support services that are supporting young people's holistic development and achievement, it allows you to tag those as well. So by having these different tags and an open text format where you can communicate what this work really does, it allows you to group and explain this work in whatever way that makes the most sense to you. So for example, you could organize your work by campaign. If you organize your different youth organizing work by campaign issue areas focused on school to prison pipeline work or police accountability or food justice, you could write out programs for each one of those things. If you just group your programs by youth organizing work, and youth development group as two separate entities. You could build those out as two separate entities and tag them with the related program issue areas and support services. If you're a multi-generational group that engages young people and parents, you could create one program module for your youth organizing work. You could create another module for your parent organizing or adult engaging work and tag those with the respective issue areas. So what we really tried to do was provide a space for you all to explain the work that you do in the terms that you do, and then have different ways that you can communicate it. We recognize that the terms and some of the issue area categories that we've developed are probably not going to be a catch-all for all of the work that's being done there. We really see this first phase of the youth organizing landscape map as a learning process and as a way that we can test this format. So while you go through there, and if you see something that doesn't reflect your work or something that's missing or something you think should be changed, we really welcome your feedback on that. We really hope that this is going to grow and change over the first year to really better be able to accurately show what your work is. So we just ask that you, if you have feedback, please send it in to me at FCYO, and we'll work on trying to sort of keep this map growing over the first year. So I'm going to stop there and take some questions. And Eric or Monica, did you have anything else to add on the map?
No, I would just add, our hope is that this map will be, we get questions from funders about, who's working on this issue, right? We want to support groups. And we hope that this will be a great way to really lift up the profile of the amazing work that you all are doing, and for people to be able to figure out, when a funder calls us and says, who's doing immigration work in Texas, with young people, we can help them find that work, and that we hope that people will update the profiles regularly. And as you have victories, this is the other thing we should say, both using this tool and other ways with the funder advocacy work that we're going to be doing, we really want to be lifting up the stories of what young people are winning. So through this tool, through other work, as you are winning great victories, let us know so that we can share them out, because we're going to be developing newsletters and all kinds of things. So please share with us your victories.
Thanks, Eric. So there's a few questions coming in. Nicole, do we need to complete the profile before we apply or just register? So the profile should be complete as the first step. It's not just to register and have just that first question of your email and password, but it is to fill out a full profile on the page. Now, just another thing to mention is that there is some information, pretty much every question in there is optional. We would love you to fill it out to the best of your ability and to really show the full extent of your work. But if there's any piece of information in there that you don't feel comfortable sharing, you do not have to put it in there. And there's a number of pieces of information that we're asking youth organizing groups to fill out, but will not be public on your profile. And the way that the profile is set up, it's pretty explicit on what those pieces are. So those pieces of information that are not public on your profile, FCYO will have and will keep confidential and will be used, like we said, to sort of further our research on the youth organizing field, but no information will be made public that isn't listed in the profile as something that will be public. And you also have the option of not filling out any piece of that if you don't feel comfortable. Another question on if we're a national organization with presence in more than one region, will that be reflected on the map? That's a great question and something we've been grappling with. I think there's a number of different ways you can approach that. If you think it's worth the capacity for each chapter to fill out a different profile, if that makes sense to you, I mean, I think we would really leave it up to you to see what's the best way to reflect the sort of spread of your work. If each individual chapter can fill out a profile, that would be great. Or if the national organization can fill something out. There's also a regional focus where we can change it to national. And the organization can communicate through the sort of text of their work that the work is national. But if that seems a little complicated, I'd love to follow up with you, Michelle, to see what we can think about making that a sort of better fit. Jen asks, will folks have to log in to view this map? Concerned about how opponents will use this. The map, it will be public. So as it is currently, it's not published on FCYO's website. If you go to fcyo.org, you won't see the map. But if you do have the IP address or the URL for the map, you can see it. So the map will be public. We are open to hearing if that concerns, groups that are worried about how some opponents may view having a map of youth organizing group. But we aren't trying to share information that isn't already public from what groups share through their websites. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, we can think about ways not to make your address public as well. But that's a great question, and that's some feedback that we've gotten as well.
Well, there's a question here about whether we're asking groups that we're not funding to complete profiles.
We, yes, I mean, I think we would love to have an accurate picture of all of the groups across the country that are doing this work. Just because, you're not a part of a funding program this year doesn't mean you won't be accepted to one next year. And it also doesn't mean that we don't need your information so we can communicate about your work to funders. Regardless of whether you're funded by an existing FCYO program, a good portion of our work is devoted to advocating for your work in philanthropic spaces. So the more we can know about you and your work, the better we can work to get you funded. So even if we're not directly funding you, having your information on the map will help us advocate for your work and know about your work when a funder comes to us and asks about who's doing this work in this specific area of the country, doing this sort of focusing on this specific constituency, we'll know that maybe you're out there doing it, and we can reach out to you to try to connect you with that funder and include you in some of the data and the research that we're doing. So I think it's really important, even if you're not funded, to fill out that profile. How long will the profile remain active? It will remain active kind of as long as you wish it to be, and as long as your organization is around, and as long as this map is around. We'd love to have groups fill it out at least or update it on a yearly basis to make sure that it reflects your current work. If at any time that you don't want to be listed on the map anymore, we'll deactivate your profile, and that's completely at your discretion. Sharif, your question, how long does it take to be verified? When can we access the profile? Yeah, it looks like maybe some technical difficulties on your end. It should, once you submit a profile and verify your email address, basically by filling out your name, email address, and organization name, it should send you an email where you click and verify it. After that, you should be able to access the map and start filling out your profile. Now, again, as I said before, that profile won't become public until we basically allow it to be public. And I think that's something that we should be in contact with each group that fills it out. For the groups that are filling out the Moment to Movement Fund applications, once your application is final and submitted, then that will be made public. For the groups that aren't applying for parts of our programs or for our initiatives, you should just email FCYO, specifically me, to let me know that your profile is done and I can activate it. And at that point, I'll activate it. It'll be visible on the map. Juan Carlos is giving a heads up that sometimes the verification email goes into the junk folder, so check that and add it to your safe senders list. It does get sent by a sort of automated system, so that does have a likelihood of being sent to spam or junk folders. Any other questions? Did I miss any?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I think if people have other questions about the map, I mean, just keep in mind, the map, it's a first step in the application process, and we're using it to take over some of the basic information that you would have to fill out in the application. So we shortened our application because we know we're getting some of that information in the mapping tool. And it means that when you apply for another FCYO project, your application will be shorter because we already have some of your basic information if your profile is up to date. So hopefully this will be a way that makes the work less for you and really helps us be able to tell the story to funders and others about what youth organizing groups are doing across the country. So if people have other questions specifically about the problem, or if you have any technical problems with it, you should email will@fcyo.org. So that said, let's move on. There's a couple of other projects in the email that we that sent out that we're going to be launching this year that we want to do quick overviews of. These projects don't have applications that are out yet. They're coming later in the year, but we just wanted you to know about them now so that you can keep them in mind. So the first is one of our capacity building projects. Each year for the last couple of years, FCYO has done a capacity building project where we have a set of 10 or 12 youth organizing groups that want to engage in learning around a specific topic. And we find an expert in the field to help do some training and some cohort-based shared learning around that topic. So last year we did one on digital organizing. The year before that we did one on finances and fundraising. And hopefully from each of these cohorts we learn lessons that can then be shared with the field as a whole. So this year's capacity building initiative is going to focus on implementing and funding holistic youth organizing. And what we mean by that is that we're trying to merge two things. One is to support youth organizing groups to figure out how to incorporate holistic healing, youth development supports, academic supports into their organizing. So as we're organizing, how do we help meet the basic needs of the young people that we're working with? How does organizing to transform systems and doing the personal transformation and support for individual leaders fit together? What can we learn about how to do these things together? What roles can youth organizing groups play in doing this? What projects do we want to, can youth organizing groups launch themselves? What partnerships can they build with other organizations to meet the needs of young people as they're organizing? So that's a question that we get from youth organizing groups all the time, and it's really about this issue about systems level social transformation and supporting the needs of individuals, and how do those fit together. So on the one hand, we want to work support groups that want to increase their ability to do that, and on the other hand, how can you actually use that to identify new funders to support your work? So for example, as you begin to do that work, are there ways that you can get funders who don't really fund organizing but do fund youth development to support your work? So we think there's overlap between supporting those individual needs and reaching out to other kinds of funders that care about young people. So this capacity building project will both be about how can you implement that and how can you identify new sets of funders as you do that kind of work. And so the capacity building project will include a 2-day in-person training, individual organizational coaching and support for your organization around those two elements, webinars for the whole cohort and some shared learning, and there will be a small grant just to compensate people for their time in participating, but it won't be a large grant. So we expect to release the RFP for this cohort in October and launch in January. So just be on the lookout. Make sure that you're on our email list, especially and if you fill out your mapping profile now, you'll already be partly done the application. So that's one project that's coming later in the year, and I will turn it over to Monica to talk about the next one.
Great. And so like we mentioned earlier, we also have a learning exchange fund, and the RFP for this will go out in January. So again, a little bit further down the line, but these are grants for up to $5,000. And we kept them pretty open because we want folks to be able to kind of, again, meet the needs of their own organization. So this money could be used for a visit to another youth organization, to bring together a few groups to learn about or discuss a particular topic or strategy, money to attend a specific trainings. We know there's a lot of trainings out there that are interesting, but maybe folks don't have it in their budget to be able to attend. So this money could be used for that. It can also be used for a specific leadership development for a key individual leader in the organization. And it could also be used as some funds to conduct an organizational learning experiment. So maybe you have a really great idea for a new type of strategy or something that you want to experiment, but don't have the funds to do it. And this could provide additional resources for you all to do that. So it's pretty open. Again, the map, filling out the map will be a part of it, and the RFP will open up in January, and funds will go out shortly after that.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add for that, on that is just remember it's really focused on learning. This is an idea. The youth core convening is going to happen every 2 years, and we were saying how can we support groups to continue to build relationships and learn between convenings, right? So the idea is to, maybe you met a group at the last convening that you really wanted to visit. This could be a way to do that. Maybe you have 3 groups across the country that are all organizing around transportation systems, and you want to get together and really talk about that issue, right? So it's focused on learning, and we will ask you to think about how can you share that learning with the field at the end. So that will be important. It could be through one of our webinars or through a workshop at the next convening, but we want you to share the learnings. But so this is, what are you learning? Where are you growing as an organization? And how could a small grant support you to do that? And we'll be willing to help work with organizations to think about how they might use that grant as well. What are trainings you might want to go to? We'll have some suggestions. But so start thinking now about what that will, the RFP is probably going to go out in January. You might start thinking now about how you might want to use that. Is there a learning experiment? Is there a training you wanted to go to? You can just start to think about that, all of that right now. But we see that as part of Youth Core, connected to the convening, as a way for groups to continue to build relationships, learn with each other between convenings. So that's a quick summary of some of the projects that FCYO has coming up over the next year. So we have a few more minutes, so we're happy to take any last questions that folks have about all of this. One thing I will just highlight before we answer questions, folks may have seen that there are 2 job positions that are available at FCYO right now. One is the program officer that you may have seen, that's going to help run some of our grant making initiatives and work on some of this youth core stuff. And then we also posted a job description for a program associate that will be based in the Bay Area. So we want fabulous people to join this team. You get to work with the 3 of us. We'd love to see some more, and we really like, like Monica and I, most of our staff are people that come out of youth organizing, and so we really want to support people that have been doing this work. So check out those job postings, pass them around to people graduates from your organizations, stuff like that. So any other questions overall about anything that we shared today, about any of the projects, about what's coming at FCYO? We'd be happy to take any other questions you have. One question I see here now is, can organizations receive more than one of these grants or funds? The only restriction currently is that groups that get the healthy communities will not be eligible for the capacity building. That is the only that is the only current restriction. Yeah. So go ahead, Monica.
But if that question was specific to the Learning Exchange Fund, then you will only be able to apply for and receive one grant for the Learning Exchange Fund. So you couldn't apply multiple times.
Right. An organization can only get one Learning Exchange Fund grant, but any organization can apply to the Learning Exchange Fund, even if you're in one of the other programs, because that's a small grants program. And Moment to Movement Fund, same thing, open to everybody. It's a 1-year grant. They're not huge grants, so they're open to everyone. But participating in Healthy Communities, which is a larger program, will exclude you from the capacity building program this year. See a question here about, Is funding available for stipends, for mentorship of youth in traditional agriculture? Or funding can go towards multimedia production. So, you know, I think that, you know, that engaging, we know there's a lot of organizing groups that do engage in agriculture, in, you know, urban gardening, rural farming as part of their organizing work, and the same thing with media. We won't directly fund groups that their primary purpose is farming or media creation. But if farming and media creation are part of your organizing strategy, part of a strategy to build power of young people, and they're engaging in campaigns for systemic change, that if it's part of an organizing strategy, part of building power, part of campaigns for systemic change, then yes. But if the primary focus is on agriculture or media support or some other form of supporting young people, that probably wouldn't be a top priority for us. Any other questions that people have? I know we've gone over a lot of different programs, but we know we were launching a lot of different programs this year, and we wanted to try to put out as much information as we could at the start of the year. So are there any other questions that we didn't address earlier about any of these projects, or anything about the overall mix of programs?
Eric,
go ahead.
I got a question over email from a movement supporting organization that trains young people to drive mass movements, but doesn't do on-the-ground organizing themselves. Are we open to funding movement support organizations, or what if we partnered with another grassroots organization? Would we support a collaboration like that?
I think a collaboration like that is a possibility, and I would also say that through the Learning Exchange Fund, that groups can get grants to work with movement support organizations, right? So one of the ways you can use the learning, we decided rather than directly funding movement support organizations, we would fund groups and let them decide which movement support organizations they might participate with, right? So, but you can let folks know, as a movement support organization, it's fine for let us know about what you're doing, and we can help share it with groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let groups that you work with know, hey, you could apply to this Learning Exchange Fund to work with us. So that's one way that we can support movement support organizations. We know they play really important roles.
And the other thing around like movement support organizations or different trainings is we're always looking for folks to do webinars with. And oftentimes we're looking for groups to provide particular TA. So it's always good for us to know what is going out there, what kind of movement support organizations out there exist, in case a moment ever comes that we might want to partner with you for something in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions that people have? Will, Monica, anything else that you wanted to make sure that we covered?
I don't think so.
No, the one other thing I wanted to mention, and this is related to the map, but it's also sort of related to a lot of FCYO's programs. And Eric sort of mentioned this at the beginning of our presentation, is that, we have a lot of programs going on right now, and we're getting interest from a lot of groups, a lot of whom we know, but many of whom we don't know. Through these programs, we'll be funding the kind of youth organizing work that we define as youth organizing work, and learning to sort of fund groups that are a little bit beyond that definition. But we just want to make sure that groups are in the right place when you're applying for a program with FCYO. And I think we would welcome you to take a look at our FAQ page, which I'll put in the chat here, to learn a little bit more about how FCYO defines youth organizing, and what that really means. But we're really excited to learn more about groups that are doing this work in a way that we haven't seen before, and groups that we just haven't heard of. So I think part of us learning more about you applying for our programs and also filling out the map is going to be us engaging in a little bit of a dialogue to learn a little bit more about your work and understanding whether you're a right fit for for participating in some of our programs. So just welcome a dialogue around that, and I'll paste in the FAQ on what is youth organizing.
And I would just like say that for folks that want to stay up with us, to make sure to follow us on Facebook. We're often posting, webinars and links to register for webinars on there, and sign up for our listserv so that you are up to date on all the things that we have to offer.
Yep, and then just last question about the webinar going to be available. We're going to try and have it up later today by tomorrow morning at the latest. A number of folks weren't able to make it today and want to review it, so we'll have it up on fcyo.org by tomorrow morning.
Yeah, let us know if you have additional questions. I mean, I think what Will said is important. Keep in mind the way that we define youth organizing. Keep in mind that that we are primarily focused on groups led by low-income young people and young people of color, primarily 13 to 18-year-olds, and that are really engaging in collective action, power building, and campaigns for systemic change. Those are key elements for us. The FAQ has a lot more detail on that. And we are focused in the U.S. So we can get it. For now, our programs are focused in the U.S. So yeah, if people have other questions, feel free to follow up with us on email. Know that we won't be able to fund every group, but part of our role as FCYO is to support and lift up the field as a whole. So we apologize that we don't have enough resources to be able to support every group that's on this webinar. We know that all of you are doing fabulous work, but if we are not able to fund you in one program, we hope that we'll be able to support you in another program. So please do stay up with us, and please know that part of our role is to try to lift up and support the field as a whole, and help having your information and being able to include it in our map and other things like that is really critical. And we really believe, as we said at the beginning, that this is a critical moment for building the power of low-income young people and young people of color, and that big things can come over the next year. We hope that these programs will help contribute to it, but we know that what drives that work is not us, but what you all are doing on the ground. And we're committed to trying to do what we can do, again, to make sure that this moment is not just a blip on the radar where there's a little bit more funding for 2 years, but that we can actually find ways to sustain and build powerful movements, using the foundation resources that are available now to actually figure out how to build resources beyond foundations that really help build the power of the young people and the communities that you all are working with. And we're committed to doing what we can do to try to do that, and let us know how we can help. And we really look forward to being in partnership with all of you. So thanks a lot. And let us know if you have additional questions. Take care, folks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Let's see. Do you want to switch off the recording, Will?